Good morning. Welcome to the Shipper Update. I'm Anthony Smith, lead economist here at FreightWaves, and we have to look at the upcoming releases for the week. That's what this Monday episode is all about. So we're going to jump into it for some of the most anticipated releases and what it might mean. So jumping into this first one, we have job openings, which is going to be a pretty substantial release. Last week, if you saw any of those economic updates, we saw that there were a lot of updates around consumer conditions. This week is going to continue with some of those releases, and especially those employment side of things. And so looking at job openings, it's going to be one of those areas that we watch closely just because they've been hovering at record highs, and consumer conditions are everything. Especially if you're a shipper, you're going to be looking for those consumer conditions for those folks to buy your goods, and then when you want those folks to work in your operations and work in your facilities, you're going to need them as well. So as long as these consumers can stay in a pretty solid foundation for those job openings and have those options to switch roles, that's really going to put a vote of confidence for those consumers. And that's going to be one of those areas that we have to look to closely, because inflation's definitely been playing a vital factor into really diminishing some of the, or a lot of the purchasing power for those consumers. So as we kind of combat that inflation, we're going to need to see pretty substantial results for these consumer conditions on the job openings and the unemployment reports. Good news from the previous unemployment report, we saw that the participation rate is indeed increasing as the unemployment rate is coming down now at 3.8%. Also seeing that those initial jobs claims are coming down on a week-to-week basis. So a lot of good news for those consumers, but it's not the end-all be-all. We have to look at each individual one and then look at it as a whole to see where the overall movement is going. One of the other things about the job openings chart here is that there's going to be other releases within this report that we have to really monitor closely, because later on in this week, we are going to get the update for consumer confidence from the University of Michigan, which really has not been doing the best, and it's understandable. We see, the Russia-Ukraine conflict going on right now. That can really lead to some economic uncertainty. We just had Thomas Watson up here talking about what's going on at the pumps. That's also going to play a factor as well, but consumer confidence is going to be some of those areas that is really going to be impacted by job openings. And so the other big thing that we have to look at, the quit rate. How often are consumers quitting and leaving their jobs voluntarily? Usually consumers do this when they are feeling confident somewhat about their economic outlook. So when we look at some of these surveys, it's definitely going to be meaningful to see, okay, what's happening with these consumers, but we also have to see what their actions are doing as well, where we're going to see, hey, are they voluntarily leaving these jobs? Are they taking a risk getting out there into the marketplace? So that's going to be an area to watch closely and really kind of see a vote of consumer confidence. Moving into our next chart here, we're also going to be watching, of course, the weekly initial jobs claims going to come out Thursday. This is going to be an area that is going to really show on a, not near real time, but a weekly higher frequency than some of the other employment conditions that are released on a monthly basis. So this is going to be one to watch closely. We just had a release of 215,000 in the most recent week. Definitely a nice low spot. We also want to see those continuing claims to come down as well. With this, as I mentioned earlier, the higher participation rate, because a better employment rate is great, but if the participation rate is lower, doesn't mean as much. So good news is that we are still seeing those participation rates really come up as those unemployment rates are coming down. In our next chart here, we're going to also be looking at total consumer spending or credit, so credit card utilization. That's going to be one to watch closely, because as consumers really start leaning more on credit card usage, revolving credit, that's really going to also tell us what kind of conditions they're going to be in. So as we can see, consumer credit utilization for revolving credit or credit card typically usage has really gone down throughout the pandemic, as we saw more stimulus packages really being infused into the economy, but it's starting to creep back up in a pretty rapid clip here. So as consumers start to use those credit cards a little bit more, as inflationary pressures continue to pick up, it's going to be extremely meaningful to watch this one, because we don't want to see those consumers really starting to overextend themselves. Now, a factor that is also going to play into this is going to be some of those maybe buy now, pay later, or pay over time types of agreements that might not really be seen to what the true ramifications or true overall outcome is going to be maybe until the end of 2022 or well into 2023 as they really kind of start to take on a lot more momentum and a lot more commonplace in e-commerce. But this is going to be another area to watch closely because as consumers continue to switch jobs, that confidence remains somewhat high based on actions but low based on surveys. How are they going to be with their pockets? Are their pockets going to be overextended, or is that credit card really going to be utilized a lot more as these inflationary pressures pick up? Are they going to continue to be able to purchase these goods? Because if that starts to slow down, of course, that means more products building up, less products being moved for those shippers, and then it all kind of goes into this vicious loop. So this is going to be one to watch closely as well on a month-to-month basis, but that's going to do it for this shipper update. We're going to toss it back over to Kaylee Nix.